What is it about him?
Well, I can understand why Farage got a little bit niffed with Nick Robinson. Oh, it's the meme, isn't it? It's almost a GIF. Farage just lost 7 elections, was beaten by a bloke dressed as a dolphin. Yeah, true, but he also won 2 European elections, leading 2 different parties, smashing the other parties into second and third place. So you pay your money, you take your choice, don't you? To suggest he's been elected 5 times.
But he's always wanted to get into British Parliament, Gawain.
Well, true, but let's be honest. I mean, for somebody who's never been in Westminster, he's had probably more influence over what's happened in this country than
Yes.
pretty much anybody since Tony Blair.
No, and
Um,
I would definitely, I would concede on that. I would concede on that. What is it about him, Gawain?
well, I think
What's
the
the kind of
one thing
attraction?
that was one thing that was said to me many moons ago by the producer of the Today program was that the thing about your boss, Gwaine, is speaks fluent human. And in a world, and the world of politics is about being able to synthesize complicated ideas and issues and make them comprehensible to the larger public. Precious few people in politics have the first idea of how to do that. Farage does it without even thinking. I used to work with the Tories. You'd give a Tory politician a half an hour briefing to speak for 3 minutes. With Farage, you give him a 3 minute briefing and he can speak for half an hour. He
Mm.
has a phenomenal ability to synthesize complicated information and make it comprehensible. Also, he doesn't pretend to be any better than anybody else. He smokes, he drinks, he enjoys himself, he has fun, he doesn't take himself seriously. Just like, well, maybe not the smoking these days, but just like the vast majority of the population of this country, he feels normal, whereas most politicians feel, frankly, very weird.
Okay.
And that has a remarkable ability to get through to people to whom politics is a closed book.
Okay, I mean, Luke, that's a very compelling defence there from Gawain that Nigel Farage is a very good and skilled and effective communicator. He feels like he's in touch with a lot of people. What do you think about that?
Well, look, I don't disagree with Gawain that Nigel Farage has a very sort of particular communication style, and there's certainly a chunk of the public for whom that really resonates with. You know, people like the plain speaking, people like the fact that he seems to be authentic. But I think what often happens is we slightly overstate that. We think that just because actually, I mean, he did very well in, leading UKIP and then the Brexit Party to 2 national election results in the European Parliament elections. But, in both of those elections, he won about 30% of the vote in 2019, 26% in 2014 on very low turnouts. And so you look at it actually, that win was the result of getting about 10% of the voting population to come out and vote for him. That is no small achievement and clearly has changed the course of British politics, but it is possible to overstate it. And I think when you drill down into Nigel Farage's appeal, he's actually much better at shifting elite opinion, spooking the Tories, particularly, into calling that referendum, than he is with connecting with the voter. And actually, some of his positions, particularly the more libertarian ones, are actually quite out of whack with most working class voters in the UK. So anti-lockdown, for instance, I can tell you from focus groups that red wall voters were some of the strongest advocates for lockdown. I mean, some of them would still like us to be locked down today. Similarly, on climate policies, very popular amongst working class voters reaching net zero. So he has some things, particularly on migration, which reach the public. But on other areas, he's actually quite out of line. We are not a libertarian country. Britons are quite authoritarian on lots of things. I think that's what gets missed in lots of this. And some of that
Okay.
kind of ordinary guy shtick doesn't quite land.
And Gawain, is Nigel Farage? Because sometimes I look at him and I think he's a really good communicator, as you say. But would he be a good politician? Because it's one thing, stoking up, issues with people, and it's easy to sort of be a kind of a critic and a commentator about everything that's going wrong. It's much more difficult to actually make things work in real life. Do you think he would always be a better campaigner and a better sort of commentator than he would be an actual politician if he were ever to be elected?
Oh, I think there's absolutely no doubt that Farage's skill set is up boys and atom and charging up the hill and being followed by vast hordes of people charging up the hill with him. Now, once he's smashed into the kitchen, I wouldn't necessarily ask him to do the dishes. Um, and I don't think anybody would pretend that administration and the technical aspects of day-to-day stuff is his forte. It isn't. What he, and that is probably true of quite a lot of politicians of a similar ilk.
Yeah.
Across, I would say the same about Jeremy Corbyn, who's another fellow who was able to get a populist politician who's able to get a great number of people supporting him. But whether he'd actually be able to organise somebody to go out and get a light bulb, I'm not entirely sure.
Well, you could say that about Boris Johnson as well.
Well, I wasn't going to mention his name, but now you brought it up. Yep, you probably could say that too. Of course, Boris was good at choosing his team when he was a London mayor. That was harder to do in number 10.
Mm. And Luke, do you think if Nigel Farage did want to throw his hat in the ring again, could he cause some trouble at the next general election?
Almost certainly, and he is a master of causing trouble and spooking the main parties, mainly the Tories, but also Labour. And there is no doubt, and we've done a bit of testing, that if Nigel Farage were fronting up Reform UK, they would be doing better, because there is that sliver of the public, and it's somewhere between sort of 10 and 15%, we think, who really do like him. His shtick really works for them. And given disillusionment with the Tories and the fact that, people don't quite think Labour's got the answers or has set out the answers, there's definitely potential for a populist right-wing party to do better, but they're not capitalising on it at the moment. And Farage could be the person to do that.
And Gawain, very, very quickly, do you think there's any chance that your former boss is going to throw his hat back in the ring in the run-up to the next general election?
Well, I gather in the last couple of days he hasn't completely ruled it out, but he also hasn't ruled it in. But he's a man about timing. He's always been about timing. He's never been about just doing what people push him to. And I love the idea that he's populist. As you were pointing out, Luke, he takes an awful lot of unpopulist positions. Indeed, Brexit was deeply unpopulist until he made it popular.